Judy's magic cast on method. I use this way of doing it by making 2 slip knots. This is to ensure that I actually cast on both socks at exactly the same space in the yarn so that I get nice matching socks. If you're using a single colour, or if you're not so worried about this, then you don't necessarily have to use a slip knot. If you watch some YouTube videos, you will find that people do different methods. Now I turn this into a slingshot. I've got my yarn here, so I've got a short tail and I've got what's known as the working yarn. So I put one over my finger and one over my thumb. I have the 2 needles held close together, and I take the yarn from my finger, and so that's the back yarn is going over the front needle, and the front yarn is going over the back needle, and this is creating our stitches. If you struggle holding the wool like this, there's really no reason why you can't just pick it up and put it in place like this. It's just a bit slower. I just find this slingshot, once you get the hang of it, is really quite quick and comfortable. So how many stitches have we got there? 2, 4, 6, 7. We want 12 in total, so that's 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Just double check it to make sure. We've got 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 stitches on both needles. Now I take the tail and I put it down through the middle there and scooch these stitches along, because now we're going to cast on the second pair. The great thing about doing 2 at a time is it means that you never get one sock. Sometimes when people have knitted one sock, they just can't really face knitting the next one. So we find 2 at a time. It's quick, it's easy, it's very easy to match up patterns, and you never suffer from one sock syndrome. So now I'm casting on the second sock on the same pair of needles. You can see once you get the hang of this, it's pretty quick and easy. Better start doing some counting in a minute. So that's 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11, one more, 12, and again we put this down through the middle there. Now we're going to start knitting our socks in the round. So for people who are only used to knitting on 2 pins and have never knitted on circular needles before, the idea is that all you do is knit in the round. You never purl using this until you get to the ribbing. So if you find yourself wanting to purl, just stop yourself. So first of all, holding tightly onto this. The reason I like to do this is A, it keeps this first stitch tight, but also if you have this tail hanging out at the bottom of your sock when you're knitting it, you always know where you started the circle. You can of course put a stitch marker there, but I find that this saves me having to do that. And so now I'm just going to knit along the first 12 stitches on this side. Having knitted those first 12, I move those along the needle and bring the next 12 up. Again, I want to tighten that first stitch by pulling on the short tail. And it's just a question of working along these 12 stitches. we are. Now this is the bit that's confusing for some people that have never worked using magic loop, but trust me, you will very quickly get the hang of it. But my top tip is always hold on to the needle so you don't lose your stitches. You now pull through and push the stitches so that you get both needles level. Okay, and let me see if I can show you that on the camera. You now check where your working yarn is, okay, and you pull out that needle and leave the stitches on the other one. So check where your working yarn is and pull out that needle. And now we just knit along the 12 stitches on the other side. I pulled my slip knot slightly tight and that's a little bit difficult, but there we go. Now on this side, you have to knit into the back of the stitch. It's just the way it works out. So it's just knitting into the back of the stitch so that you don't get a twisted stitch on those ones. If you forget, it really doesn't matter, but you will find that this is the starting point of your socks, and it gives a really nice even cast on. Done those, now on to the next 12. Again, just knitting into the back of these. You may well find that there's other ways you like to do this. Over the years where I've been knitting socks, I've discovered all sorts of tips and tricks that I enjoy, but there's no right or wrong way of doing anything. And at Socks Against Suicide, we are very keen that people just get to enjoy and learning how to make socks, and you can do it whichever way you want. On the next round, we're going to increase on the first stitch in and the stitch before last on both sides, because what you're doing here is making the toe of the sock. So we've just cast on here, and now you can see you're going to increase on both sides so that you can make that toe. So to do that, make sure our working yarn, our tail has gone down the middle there, and we pick up our working yarn and we knit into the first stitch, and on the second stitch we knit into it and then we knit into the back. That creates a little bar there, and that's a very easy way of checking which row you're on, because while you're doing the toe, you are now going to do an increase row, and on the next row it's just plain knitting. So every other row you're increasing one stitch either end. So that's my increase stitch there. And the reason you do it one stitch in is it gives you a nicer finish. Let me see if I can show you again on these socks, which have been rather worn, but by doing it one stitch in, you get a nicer finish. So you continue knitting every other row, increasing every other row, until you have 30 stitches on each side. Here we have the two toes finished, and we're ready to start the foot. They're both on the same needle, as you can see, and from this point on, all you're going to do is continue knitting round and round and round until you get to the right length to start the heel. The easiest way is to slip them onto your own feet if you're knitting them for yourself, and measure this up against your ankle bone. If you can feel where your ankle bone is, that's where you want to stop knitting. Or if you're knitting them for someone else, stop 2 inches short of the length of the foot of that person, and then we'll be going on to do the heel next. Happy knitting!